What Science Says About Race, Naturalist versus Social Theories Explained. Hi, I'm David Miguel Gray, and I'm an assistant professor of philosophy at Colgate University. Today, we're diving into a topic that's often confusing: racial ontology. Welcome to part 2 of our 4-part series, A Guide for the Perplexed. In part 1, we explored 3 core challenges that make defining race tricky. These were the domain problem, the expertise and deference problem, and the mismatch problem. Now, in part 2, we'll examine a specific set of theories called naturalist theories of race. While the term naturalism has many meanings, in this context, it refers to the idea that certain properties, like physical characteristics, exist independently of human interpretation. For example, if we look at physical properties like color, shape, or texture, they're grounded in the material world. However, other domains, like morality or abstract concepts, might not fit this framework. Take morality. The wrongness of pushing someone in front of a car isn't purely physical. Even though the car, the person, and the act of pushing are physical, the moral judgment of that action isn't. So if someone claims that moral properties are physical, they'd argue that the wrongness is part of the physical world. This debate is complex, but for our purposes, let's focus on race. To be a naturalist about race means believing that racial traits are purely physical. But wait, if race is physical, what else could it be? Another possibility is that race is a social property, shaped by human decisions and actions. For instance, the Great Sphinx of Giza has a natural property: it's made of limestone. But the fact that it's a statue isn't a natural property, it's a human creation. So if we view race as natural, it suggests that races exist independently of human influence. Naturalists would argue that races are like the Sphinx. They're real, observable features of the world that scientists can study. Conversely, the opposing view is that races are socially constructed, which will be the focus of part 3. Now, we've established 2 perspectives, one where race is natural, and one where it's social. This leads us to a crucial question: what exactly qualifies as a natural property for race? Before the 20th century, natural historians linked race to physical traits like inherited features, e.g., skin color, facial structure, which they believed were shared among members of a group. These traits formed a hierarchical system, categorizing races based on physical, behavioral, intellectual, and moral differences. However, these older views are less relevant today, so we'll focus on the modern debate between naturalism and social construction. Today, the concept of race has little to no scientific basis and only surfaces occasionally among those who hold a narrow or purposefully biased view of human biology. If you want to delve deeper into how modern research dismantles racial categories, I highly recommend these works: Michael Udall, Dorothy Roberts, Robert Dessel, and Sarah Tishkoff's Taking Race Out of Genetics, NetBlocks, How Heritability Misleads About Race, and Alan Templeton's Biological Races in Humans. These readings set the stage for what some philosophers, like Josh Glasgow, refer to as the new biology of race. Unlike the outdated view that races possess fixed hierarchies or inherent moral and intellectual differences, the new biology acknowledges that populations, often labeled as races, do share certain natural characteristics. However, these shared traits tell us nothing meaningful about a group's average intelligence, behavior, or morality. Instead, they simply reflect common biological features. There are various ways one might specify which natural properties define a race, but a particularly influential idea is to see races as partially demarcated by reproductively isolated breeding populations. To unpack that, let's start with 2 definitions. 1. Population, a collection of individuals of the same species living in the same region. 2. Breeding population, a subset of that population whose members can and do interbreed sexually. Reproductive isolation occurs whenever a breeding population cannot exchange genes freely with other groups of the same species. 2 main forces can cause this separation. Geographic isolation, physical barriers like mountains, deserts, or oceans can split one community into 2. Picture an island population of humans cut off from the mainland. Over generations, they develop distinct genetic markers shaped by their unique environment. Here, the planet's geography molds the population's shared biological traits. Social isolation, even without physical barriers, cultural practices can create reproductive barriers. Suppose a society forbids marriage between wealthy and poor families or between people of different height groups. Over time, these taboos keep gene pools separate, and social norms thereby influence the group's biological characteristics. With that in mind, how might we define race using reproductively isolated breeding populations? One simple approach is to link race to ancestry. For example, if both of your parents belong to race X, then you, too, are considered a member of race X. But this raises two puzzles. 1. What if one parent is from race X and the other from race Y? We might need to invent a new category, say race C, or conclude that the child doesn't fit any isolated group precisely, because their lineage spans multiple breeding populations. 2. Even if both parents belong to race X, why are they race X? We could point to their parents, and then to their grandparents, tracing back indefinitely. This leads to an infinite regress. Each generation's membership hinges on the generation before it, without ever explaining what first made a group a distinct race. To stop this regress, philosophers offer two main solutions. One common answer goes like this. At some point, an ancestor becomes a member of race X because they share observable traits, skin tone, facial features, genetic markers, that typify a reproductively isolated group. Those traits, in turn, define membership for subsequent generations. In this way, the chain of explanation begins with concrete biological characteristics rather than an endless ancestry loop. Another approach to defining an ancestor's membership in a particular racial group involves looking at shared genetic characteristics that are specific to a reproductively isolated population. This idea hinges on the fact that while our DNA influences many aspects of our biology, much of our genetic code doesn't directly affect the physical or observable traits we see in everyday life. For instance, two individuals might share similar genetic markers but exhibit very different physical features because those markers don't impact visible characteristics. To illustrate this concept, imagine a scenario where cattle from distinct breeding groups are classified based on either their genetic makeup or outward appearances. This method offers one way to construct a naturalist perspective on race. However, there are still challenges to address, such as the domain problem, the expertise and deference issue, and the mismatch problem discussed in the first video. I should mention that this explanation intentionally remains broad to accommodate various naturalist theories, without getting into specific responses to every potential concern. For readers interested in exploring further, three notable works that engage with these ideas include Philip Kitcher's Race, Ethnicity, Biology, and Culture, Robin Andrea Denny's The Meaning of Race, Folk Conceptions in the Knee Biology of Race, and Quay-Sean Spencer's A Solution to the Race Problem. For critical perspectives on naturalistic definitions, Joshua Glasgow's On the New Biology of Race provides a useful counterpoint. In Part 3, we'll shift focus to social theories of race, which offer alternative frameworks for understanding this complex topic.